Marvin Harrison Jr. touchdown. Marvelous
Home next to the end zone. Drop down for Franklin. Oh, majestic touchdown.
This is Chasing the Natty, a college fantasy football podcast. All right, welcome in, everybody. This is Jared Palmgren, host of the Chasing the Natty podcast. I hope you guys are having a wonderful... God dang it, I knew I was forgetting to do something. Ignore all of those graphics there at the bottom, everybody. I knew I forgot something. Well, you got a little sneak peek at Monday's CTN right there, everybody. So for those of you who are watching, you got, again, a great little sneak peek right there. We got an awesome show here for you guys. I keep pressing all the wrong buttons today. Got an awesome show for you guys here today. Again, we got our second rendition of our ranking summit for CFF this year. Today, it is just myself, Chris K, and Justice. Nate is doing this little thing called an anniversary vacation. How that guy prioritizes what he does, I will never know. But regardless, the show must go on, so it is me, Kay, and Justice here. So we are going to be talking a ton about our top running backs and wide receivers. We got some CFF on trial for you guys. We'll be calling each other out for our misguided, dumb, whatever you want to call rankings for running backs and wide receivers. So we'll definitely get all to that. But in addition, we will be able to take a lot of questions because there's only 3 of us today. So we got a little bit more time to actually talk to you guys there in the chat. I see Luke, I see Ben, I see Shane. You guys are blowing up the chat right now. Appreciate you guys really letting us know what you think, especially definitely catching my mistake with the graphics there. And Yeet Boss, welcome, sir. Good to see you again from last year. Appreciate that. Again, lots and lots of great stuff. So if you guys have any questions regarding running backs, we will definitely get to that. But first and foremost, I've been talking a while. Kay, we'll start with you. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm good, man. This should be fun. I don't know. Maybe it's the graphics, but it looks better with 3 people rather than 4. I'm not going to lie. So this looks good. This will be great. The followers and listeners and watchers will enjoy it.
Justice, how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. Just getting back home from having an early dinner, but it's a little hectic, but I'm here.
Yeah, today has been hectic for me as well. I was supposed to go tomorrow to quote unquote move into my new apartment. But then they told us like last minute, like, hey, by the way, we're closed on Sundays, even though you're moving days tomorrow. So you're going to have to come a day early. So we woke up this morning, drove over there, got the apartment, cleaned it up a little bit, had a wonderful, wonderful brunch. There's a place, I don't know, Kay, if you've been over by Lilburn, called 1910 Public House.
I've eaten there, actually.
Oh, you've been there?
Yeah.
Holy crap. You were the person I didn't expect to know that. Dude, that is some good fine Southern cuisine right there. I had their fried chicken biscuit, which was about yay big around, and it had some of the best gravy I've ever had in my life. So, okay, you're nearby there. Go give.
I'm not that nearby there.
You're like 45 minutes away. You're not terribly far.
I mean, that's the other side of the city, so probably like an hour. But that the problem is there's a lot of good places to eat around here. So like if I want to hit up a brunch or a breakfast or something, it's just. You got to be really, really good to convince me to go.
I don't know. This is pretty.
But maybe I'll
good.
be in the area one time and I'll be like, boom, go figure. The Justice has hit it up before.
Dude, that threw me off there for a second. Oh my goodness. Anyway, we can get away from all that. Also, Shane, to answer your question in the chat there, you're asking, is UGA Philly's new mascot? Dude, that is a beautiful, beautiful partnership right now between those two programs. So most likely, yes, you'll see them become the Philadelphia Bulldogs here in a little bit. So, gentlemen, let's go ahead and start talking about some of these running backs here. Let's go ahead and put up our top 12 of the season up here on the board. For those of you who cannot read it or you are listening to the later, hold on, y'all, while I mute my Slack because people are just so rude talking in a group chat while I'm trying to record things. Let me go ahead and read off to you our top 12 running backs here. Number 1, Quinshon Judkins out of Ole Miss. Number 2, Raheem Sanders out of Arkansas. Number 3, Rasheen Ali, running back out of Marshall. Number 4, Braylon Allen out of Wisconsin. Number 5, Blake Corum out of Michigan. Number 6, LaDamian Webb out of South Alabama. Number 7, Kavorian Barnes out of UTSA. Number 8, Saban Gura out of Ohio. Number 9, Will Shipley out of Clemson. Number 10, Frank Gore Jr. out of not Tennessee. Dang it, I knew I messed up another graphic. Southern Miss. He's going to Southern Miss. That would be a wild transfer here at the end if he went to Tennessee. And then Trey Benson out of Florida State and Damian Martinez out of Oregon State. So, I guess we'll start here at the top. Let's just start at the top. Quinshon Judkins, pretty much in most drafts, has been the number 1 running back taken off every single time. I think he's the only running back I have seen be drafted in the first round every single draft, which I guess is another place we could start. Do you think he kind of deserves that kind of separate tier for himself? Because I've never seen him make it to the second round. I've seen guys like Raheem Sanders. I've seen guys like Rasheen Ali. They slide to the beginning of the second round. What do you think about that, Kay? Mm-hmm. I would say, if anything, it's gotten better because Evans is gone. Mm-hmm. So ADP to me this year is interesting. What's up, Justice? They can't hear? Oh my goodness. Okay, so Kay, go ahead and say. Appreciate that.
Oh no, did you just mute me?
I muted both of you. Apparently, I am so sorry. You guys have. Oh my
I'll
God!
redo it.
Good Lord, this is a disaster. I am so sorry, y'all.
Let's see if I can repeat this greatness again. So I was saying, like, when it comes down to it, like, I think there's an argument for like the top quarterback, receiver, not tight end, obviously, but with running back, I think Judkins is like such a high floor and has such a big upside, and nothing has negatively changed. Like nothing has. There's no transfers in. There's no big receivers coming into Ole Miss that like is just greatly changing everything. So like for me, Judkins is like in a clear tier of his own. Like I like other running backs, and I think there's a shot at like Ali or Sanders, et cetera, to finish above Judkins. But in terms of like safety valve, no issues, no concerns, Judkins is like elite. One option. I've never once thought somebody else should be the QB or the running back one.
So something that I find interesting about ADP this year, we already talked about it last time when we did the quarterback summit, where you have 6 quarterbacks that pretty consistently go off in the first round, 5 maybe. What has been the big change this year is typically you see like 5 or 6 running backs go off in the first round. As I mentioned just a little bit ago, Quinshon Judkins is the only one that consistently stays in round 1. Now, you see Rasheen Ali and Raheem Sanders go off in the first round a lot. Braylon Allen sneaks up there every once in a while. But, Justice, what do you think about that change this year? Like, that running backs aren't going as quickly as they have in the past for CFF.
I just think it's just the unknown, right? Like we don't necessarily know who to expect. Just simply in preparing for our on trial parts, I think I want to say I had Frank Gore as number 19 last year. Well, 14 of the guys in front of him are gone. And so I think that's a big part of what you're seeing. I will say this. I would not be surprised if Ali is the number 1 running back at the end of the year.
Nope, I
And
wouldn't be shocked by that.
for me personally, I'd rather have a later pick and get the discount on him than have to, take Judkins where he's going.
No, I think that's absolutely fair. And you're talking about, like I said, Judkins consistently the only guy that goes in the first round, and he's typically gone by like the fourth pick. You see Caleb go off, you see Marvin Harrison Jr. go off, and then you probably see one of Quinshon Judkins or a guy like Malachi Core, or probably you actually never mind. Definitely see one of the quarterbacks come off, and then you probably see Quinshon Judkins there. And to your point there, Justice, let's look at who I have as my top running backs last year, and let's name all the ones that are gone. Bijan, Izzy, Dwayne McBride, Mohamed Ibrahim, Carson Steele, he transferred out, Xavier Valade, Blake Cora, Quinshon Judkins, Raheem Sanders, 3 of our top 5, they're back. But then again, a lot of unknown. Kalen LeBour, Keaton Mitchell, Brad Roberts, Tyjae Spears, Deuce Vaughn, Chase Brown, Eric Gray, Kendre Miller, all those guys in a row are just all gone. And so it definitely pushes up some guys that we think are like guys that'll finish in that like RB like 20 range most likely, but because like you said of the unknown, suddenly got Will Shipley, who I don't know if he'll finish as the RB9, but like I'm taking him as the RB9 just because of I know for a fact he's going to lead Clemson's running back room. Now, there's some people who love Maffa as a debate for a different day, but
he's a known factor. Right? You know what you're getting.
Yeah, there's a safety net to it. And to add on to what Justice was saying was like, I think there's such a gap at receiver after the first like 6 to 8 guys, maybe 6 or 7 guys that like, I think people are rushing to take receiver. I know I am. Like if Judkins isn't there and Rasheen Ali, I really like, and Braylon Allen, of course, too. But, like for me, I'm thinking I don't feel super confident in the receiver group past the 3rd round. Like this 3rd to 7th round gap is like kind of sketchy for me. So I'm very much hitting running back early. I'm sorry, receiver at the very beginning, then some running backs, and then back to receiver. So it's almost like that first round is just heavy receiver for me because I want to make sure I get one of those studs because I just don't know who's going to be there between the 4th, 5th, 6th round and like who will ultimately be a good pick.
Yeah, I think like go ahead, Justice.
I was gonna say in the receiver pool lesson, right? Because we don't know where Franklin's gonna end up. So that's one of those guys that's there, right?
Yeah, we just for everybody know, we'll get to Franklin and the wide receivers here in a little bit. You're gonna still see Zachary Franklin as like a top 3 receiver. These are our rankings from a little bit ago. You'll see him definitely drop, I think, at every single one of our rankings just by the mere transfer of him because it's hard for me to imagine a place where he can land that he'll still retain that first round value. So, the interesting thing is you're talking about those wide receivers and like the steep drop off after like the first 8, Chris, which pushes them up into that first, 2nd round range. These running backs all go off around like the 2nd, 3rd round and everything. I think what makes it more interesting than the receivers is that both receiver and running back got hit pretty hard in terms of who goes off to the draft this year. But I think running backs, it's a lot clearer who some of those next guy up are for a lot of these programs, even guys outside of this top 12 here. But again, look, you got guys like Kavorian Barnes, who he looked really good at the end of last year. Rasheen Ali, he's going to take back over for Kalen LeBour. You got Trey Benson, who's going to be probably the lead back for Florida State. We're all big on that. Damian Martinez. Even guys beyond this, like guys like LaQuint Allen, Jermaine Brown Jr. at UAB, like it kind of makes the running back position feel a little bit more deep, especially in those mid rounds. Now, what I have found is I'm with UK, where I like to hit receiver early because of those known quantities, but I like the receivers I can take shots on later compared to the running backs I can take shots on later. So that's why I try to load up on running backs in that like round 3 to like 8 range, because those are the ones I feel comfortable with. After that, there becomes almost a wasteland of running backs where I don't really know who to take a shot on. Do you guys kind of feel the same way?
Yeah, I mean, I think I did the same thing in the one mock that I did. Got 2 receivers in my first 3 picks and then kind of worried about running backs before going back to receiver or quarterback.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And like anytime you get like Trey Benson, LaDamian Webb and Barnes and Cooper, and I like the transfers like Raymond Davis and Marshawn Lloyd. Like and Aiden Robbins, I'm cooling on him a little bit, but I think like those types of guys are guys that are super appealing. It's a little bit easier to predict running backs as well compared to receivers that, there's a target share question that can fluctuate and things like that. You're a little bit more reliant on the actual quarterback itself. So I have found myself really loving any running back from round 3 to round 6, right? Jason McClellan and Rodney Hammond, maybe like those types of guys are feeling very high flourish where I don't have to necessarily worry about just putting up a complete dud on a 5th rounder. Whereas some of these receivers I do like, but the risk feels a lot higher for what should be a 5th rounder. I mean, a lot of that's just because it's April and things are changing and all that. But I think even as the season or the off season progresses, we'll still see the same type of thing.
I mean, let's take a guy, for example, that we all like Squirrel White, right? He goes in that 3rd, 4th round, maybe if you're lucky, 5th round area. But the running backs in that area are guys like Jason McClellan and, like Kay said, Rodney Hammond. There is way more risk with Squirrel White, I would say, than either one of those two guys. So to me, again, I'm with Kay 100% that next tier of wide receivers, it feels like it's way more risk than it's worth.
Well,
go ahead, Justice.
Yeah, the other thing I would say is that next group of running backs, right? That next, I don't know, 10, maybe to 15 guys. A lot of those guys will finish in the top 10. Because I think what you're seeing in the rankings are the guys people feel are the most safe, right? And that's why they gravitate towards the top. Not necessarily that's where they're going to end up at the end of the year. So I think at you get those guys later on that are actually going to finish in the top 10.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value in like a high floor, like that nice safety type pick. Guys like Shipley and Corum like totally hit that mold. And like I have both of them 5 and 6, but like guys like Webb and Benson and some of these others that are in the teens, you could easily finish better than them. But it's just a matter of like there's so. I mean, I know what I'm getting out of Corum. I know what I'm getting out of Shipley. Like, I don't have any concerns about it. And if I draft them as like the RB6 and they finish RB16, like I'm not mad at all, right? So I think that's a really good point for sure, Justice.
Alrighty, I will ask you guys one thing here, Kay. You cannot name the one player you're going to be put on trial here for in a second, but I will ask you if you guys would consider one player in this top 12 a landmine for CFF. Like this, it could, like we talk about how safe the running backs feel, but if there's one here that could blow up in your face, who would it be? I'm going to go first. I'm going to go LaDamian Webb. I do like LaDamian Webb a lot, but they have brought in several running back options, and the way the coaching staff has been talking about them this season, it very much sounds like that they gave Webb the volume that they did last year almost out of necessity because other guys were banged up. He was just that much better than everybody else, and now they're feeling really good about some of the transfers they're bringing in. They consider their running back group almost the strongest unit on the team. I think Webb's still going to be a good CFF back, but it definitely feels like he has the biggest landmine potential to me out of this group. And I'm definitely, after this show, going to be dropping him a few spots based on where I have seen him, or based on what I've been hearing out of the Jaguars camp lately. Justice or Kay, which one of you guys would like to go first?
I'll go last.
Okay, Kay?
I think I can't say it because I think I'm talking about Frank Gore, aren't I?
Yeah, you'll be defending your ranking of Frank Gore later.
I'd say, man, this is tough. I'd probably say Damian Martinez or Trey Benson, which is kind of a cop-out because they're at the very end. But, like, I think Nate and I have talked about it with you guys in the Slack. Like, Damian Martinez, that's a lot of yards he has to get and a lot of potential receptions for him to be at this high of a pick, considering Oregon State likes to just vulture touchdowns, right? Like, DJU is a vulture in itself before adding him to an offense that likes to kind of do that. And I think Trey Benson as well, like, I think a lot of people saw the end of the season and thought like, wow, like kind of like Kavorian Barnes, right? Like, wow, this guy is really good. if they just let him do his thing, he's gonna be awesome, which could certainly happen. But I could see a route of Jordan Travis stealing touchdowns, Toafili getting touchdowns.
Yep.
Like Florida State definitely wants to use other guys, and Florida State's definitely better, and they're going to play some games where we're going to be up up pretty big. So like, Travis isn't the same old, last year I bagged on him for like his passing skill set, but he's much better passing. So I could see some routes to where Benson isn't necessarily needed as much, maybe a little bit more committee than we thought. And like, I think those two pop out as the guys that in Gore as well. The bottom three, I'm such a cop out, but yeah, those are the guys that jump out to me.
All right, Justice, you chose to go last, and now you got the hardest choice of figuring out who else is a landmine here, because Kay took two of them.
It's actually not hard because this is the guy I would have picked before Kay went anyway. So Bangura.
Really?
He's probably the one I'm least comfortable with, and I will probably never own him. If he's the 8th running back off the board. Ohio doesn't have a history, right? They don't have that workhorse history. Can he repeat what he did last year? I don't know.
I'm curious, do we have any data on like how he performed pre and post Rourke injury? That's Ohio, right?
I forget. I think Rourke went down in week 11, correct?
So we probably don't have much. We don't have many weeks.
No, I would say
I don't disagree. I think that makes a lot of sense. Ohio was rolling through the passing game to start.
Yeah, so the last 3 weeks of the season, Bangura had 29.7, 26.8, and 15.6 fantasy points. So 3 strong finishes for him there, even with Rourke not on the field. So, but again, I like the boldness, Justice. I like it, and you being frank. So let's get to the fun part of the show. But actually, do you guys want to do questions first, or do you guys want to do on trial first? I'll leave it up to you guys.
Let's do some questions. Why not?
All right. Ben's got a question. Do y'all think that Treshaun Ward will fill the hole left by Deuce Vaughn decently well? Even if he's like 60 to 75% of the same kind of production, is he worth drafting in redraft formats? I would say at his current value, no. I believe you're seeing him typically being drafted around in that kind of 3-4 range. And again, as much as I like a lot of the running backs in that, well, again, that's part of the reason. I love a lot of the running backs in that range. And when Ward comes off the board, I frankly kind of give a sigh of relief thinking, okay, that's going to be one of my guys that makes it one step further down to me, because I was not going to take Ward that high. The staff has come out and said they do not plan on giving any running back the Deuce Vaughn load that they had in the past. They want to split it up a little bit more between Treshaun Ward and Giddens. Obviously, Giddens has to get healthy. We'll see. But I will say I am not drafting him thinking I'm getting Deuce Vaughn moving forward. Kay or Justice, your thoughts?
I was going to say I agree. I think there was already a statement from the coach, right, that said it's going to be running back by committee. So, at that price, I'm not drafting him that high.
It's just really a question if you think Ward can break away from that committee, because lots of teams go into the season thinking it's going to be a committee, and then one guy just separates himself, and you have to keep giving him the ball. Kay, your thoughts on Ward?
I would agree. Before the committee questions, just based on like where he's being picked. Like I think I took him in like the first mock we did, Jared, and I was like 8th round or 9th round, whatever it was, and I was like, this is incredible. Like he'll be worth like a 5th rounder. And immediately he was being picked at like that 4 or 5, and I just kind of cooled. I just don't like, that's his upside to me. Like I don't really want to take him at the very best, considering pre-coach comments and now post-coach comments. Like I try not to. I don't know. I don't like to believe everything coaches say, for sure, and I get bit by that pretty hard sometimes. But I think he could be the RB1, and he could do 80% of the snaps that Vaughn got and get that type of usage. But I still don't think he's worth like the 4th round ADP that he has. So I think ultimately, I agree with you guys for sure.
I think also with the size difference between him and Giddens is about 20 pounds heavier, right? It kind of would make sense that maybe he's the goal line short yardage guy too.
Mm-hmm. No, I think.
Kind of. You mean you saw that with at Florida State, right? With Ward.
Yep. I think that's definitely possible. And again, obviously, right now, if you're going to choose one running back out of Kansas State, like Ward's the guy. But at his current value, I don't think you can do that.
It's just tough. It's just tough to like commit to that, considering all the guys around him. Is I think the thing that really holds me back.
Shane, not a question, but I think it's an interesting comment here. Shane Whitehead says, or Whitehead, says people are sleeping on John Lee Elridge, which, if you don't know who that is supposedly the next starting running back for Air Force this next year. Shane believes that he's going to get Brad Roberts production. Brad Roberts was a top 20 running back in CFF last year. My thoughts on this is, like, I think he's actually worth a shot considering where he's being drafted. Like, you see him typically come off like in the round 20 plus range. But I think you can't do that full, like, knowing there's a huge risk there. People have gotten burned very badly in the past trying to chase after like Army and Navy running backs that produce well that next year, thinking, oh, this guy's going to replace who came before. And they just split the carry so much because of the triple option that they run.
Well,
So,
I think also it's
just-
probably, Brad Roberts was probably a special talent, right? And so expecting someone else to have that same talent level is probably not realistic. I mean, you see it like with the Navy quarterback, right?
Yeah.
Will he get the touches? Maybe. But will he be as productive as Brad Roberts? Probably not.
Yeah, I'm trying
It's
to look
so
up
tough.
their stats from last year. Go ahead, Kay.
I mean, I totally get it, right? And he definitely has that, like, feels like inside edge, that inside lane towards it, but there's so many ways that could go wrong. You talk about these like top 20, top 30 guys and like the routes to them being awful or not producing, or like injury and maybe one other random thing. And for him and other Air Force guys, like, I don't trust anything anybody says out of that camp.
Nope.
Like, there's a lot of ways that he could just not be valuable.
Yeah, remember when Roberts was supposed to miss 5-6 games to start the season
with
last year?
Zeke Daniels, right? It was like, yeah, they're not going to be back till like end of October, and then that was not the case at all. Like, I just don't trust anything in the 20s that makes, in terms of rounds, that makes a ton of sense, especially if you've done a good job of taking like a Corum or Shipley early to provide like a safer option at the top. Like, a guy like that is like an easy no-brainer.
Yeah.
The upside.
I think there's incredible upside there. And Shane points out that Air Force lost 6 running backs. I'm not going to read too much into that, because for Air Force, again, unless you're a guy like Brad Roberts or John Lee Elridge, these guys are dime a dozen for them. So if they lost 6 guys, yeah, they probably got 6 guys coming in this very next year that are just as equally talented that they're going to rely on in the same exact way. I don't think that's the reason to pick on John Lee Elridge. I think there's other reasons, like the fact that, again, he was clearly the number 2 behind Roberts last year, and so you could see him, like, again, Justice, you think Brad Roberts was a special talent, maybe Elridge is too. So again,
it could be, and
at
the round you're getting him, right, is definitely worth a shot. I think the problem is, right, the more people talk about him, it goes up, and then it ain't worth. The value's not there anymore.
Yeah, makes sense. Last question here before we actually get onto the trial. Ben asked another one. He says, "What do we think about Barnes from Oklahoma? Do we think that Barnes from Oklahoma? Do we think Sawchuk will be eating into a significant amount of the touches and it will hurt his value? He is hurt right now. He is dealing with a dead bone injury. That's gonna nag him all season long. I'd stay away from Barnes right now. And quite frankly, I'd take Sawchuk at his value right now. If that injury is going to keep nagging Barnes all season long, Sawchuk really looks like he's kind of set up for, if Barnes were to miss a few games, those few games, Sawchuk will be the clear number 1 running back for Oklahoma during that time. So I take the shot on Sawchuk, in my opinion, especially at value right now. Kay or Justice, your thoughts?
I was gonna say I agree with you. I think, I don't want to misquote Nate, but in the Slack, but didn't he kind of tell us that this issue that he has, this dead bone issue, it's like a blood flow issue?
Yeah.
And it's not going to improve. It's going to be what it is. And so that, to me, it's a little bit concerning.
Yeah, I want nothing to do with the dead bone issue, especially at where he's getting picked. And like, you make a good point, Jared. Like, Sawchuk is a very solid to very good potential running back. All it takes is, him to Barnes to miss a couple games, Salchuk to be awesome in a non-conference schedule, and then there's also Marcus Major still there, right? Like,
Yep.
that's a deep enough room where I don't want any part of Barnes at that ADP, especially with that health
they'll
issue,
have
man.
No problem sitting Barnes because of the talent they have behind him and say like, hey, you get healthy. These guys got it for this week. Alrighty, I think now is the time that we can finally move and put first Mr. K on trial. We've been teasing this enough here. Not this guy. We'll get to him later. There it is. Let's put you on trial, though, for your Frank Gore ranking here. Mr. Frank Gore, this is our RB10 consensus-wise, which is right where I have him. Justice has him a little higher there at RB7. But, Kay, you got him all the way down at RB22. Kay, actually, how do we want? I think we usually do it to where we prosecute first and then, Kay, you defend. So, Justice, I'll let you go first.
I thought we did opposite last time.
I think we did opposite, but
did we have opposite last time?
Yeah. We let the person go and state their case, and then the rest of us.
My brain is mush after the past couple of weeks, so Kay, you go ahead and start your defense first then.
I mean, ultimately, his season looked awesome, right? Like 1,300 yards, almost 1,400 yards, 9 touchdowns. The reason why I'm very weary of him is he basically had like 40% of his production in the last 2 games. And if you look at like maybe what did he do the full season, he only hit 100+ yards 3 times. It was the last 2 games and the first game, and that was a 4 overtime game against Liberty in week 1. I just am very worried about like actually can he do it week in and week out? Like obviously he's good, at least for a college player, but like there's a ton of 80-yard games, and he's not that great in the passing game. So, like, I think he's one of those types where he ends fairly well in terms of his, like, RB ranking, but, like, he does it all in, like, 3 weeks. Like, literally 178, 199, and 329. Quick math tells me that's got to be half of his production in 3 games. So that's what worries me. Their team is better. I think their coach came out, was it Will Hall, right? He came out and said, like, we'd like to not hammer Frank Gore a ton, essentially. So I think there's potential for other guys getting play. And I just think like their quarterback play is not good. So like there's a real shot that they just don't score a ton, right? So if other guys are eating into it and they don't score a ton in general, like it just is. I'm very weary. I like a lot of the running backs in the teens. And I just ended up putting them behind them because I think those guys have essentially the same floor and more upside.
So, Justice, I'll let you start with the prosecution because I promised I'd let you start.
So I think like what what Chris said about what the coach talk, right? I think they say that every year about Southern Miss. Oh, we're better, but it hasn't proven out over the last 2 seasons. I think the reason to have him higher is he is the Southern Miss offense, right? Other than him, they don't have anybody else. He does play Wildcat quarterback some, right? And like you said, the quarterback play is not great at Southern Miss. So perhaps that they'll continue to do that. The other thing, they return most of their offensive line, which I think is a good thing for any running back. As I mentioned earlier when we were talking about our top 12, he was 19th in points per game last year, and 14 of those players in front of him are all gone. So while I think you can make a case maybe he doesn't finish top 10, I don't see a world where he doesn't finish top 20. The schedule isn't terrible. They do have 2 kind of rough weeks with Florida State week 2, and then Mississippi State, which would be week 12, which would be your playoffs. So that's not ideal. But I think, Gore is a good, safe option.
So, Kay, you say that the coach doesn't want to hammer Gore. No coach wants to hammer their number 1 running back, but they also realize that if they want to win, they have to rely on Frank Gore. This guy is everything you want in a CFF player for yourself. He's a touch hog. He is by far the best thing about this offense. Quite frankly, I'm shocked that he didn't try to move up in the transfer portal during this offseason, try to land at a bigger name school, but I think he realizes that, like, hey, I am a big fish in a small pond over here. My dad's Frank Gore. The NFL is going to find me over here. I am just going to continue to be the best player I can be over here. My kind of bigger problem is outside of, again, I think it's a touch hog. You're easily going to get 200 touches from him. So that's an easy bet for me to make in early rounds of CFF, is that you're going to get a guy with that many touches. There's other landmines where you get a lot worse, much quicker. And especially we saw it over the last 4 games. He had 21.8 touches per game in the last 4 games. So they clearly, once they kind of realized, like, hey, we got to rely on Frank Gore, they gave him the ball as much as possible. I think they're going to do that this entire season. The other part of it is, Kay, I got a problem with who you got him ranked behind. Again, I know
that's valid. That may be more valid than where I have him ranked.
So,
and I'll give you that.
So, like, I'm looking at guys like, again, I'm not going to give you much crap for Aidan Robbins. You already said you're kind of backing off him a little bit. That's fine. But Marshawn Lloyd?
Oh, I love Marshawn
I know
Lloyd.
You love Marshawn Lloyd.
Give me Marshawn Lloyd.
Like, you want to talk about
what did Travis Dye do last year?
Yeah, but you don't know that it's going to be him versus Jones. There's some.
I'm not worried about
Austin
Jones. I've seen him play football.
You also got him behind Travion Henderson, another guy that's probably going to be in a split backfield.
That may be fair.
You got him behind Nicholas Singleton, who's going to be splitting carries with Katron Allen this year, with a team that might be throwing the ball a little bit more than they have. I don't know. You got a pretty safe guy here, a guy that's going to get you 200 touches, and you're putting him behind guys where they could easily hit under 200 touches on the season because of the situation. Their talent's there. I'll give you that. Like, I love, give me Travion Henderson, Nicholas Singleton in like a Devi league all day long. But in terms of CFF, in terms of production, I don't know how you can have him behind those guys. I can understand you having him in like the early teens. I can understand you having him in the mid-teens. I can't understand you having him down there at 22. So that's kind of my argument on it.
I think there's a couple guys for sure that I think, like, if I was to redo, because we've kind of frozen rankings here in the last couple of weeks just to like prepare for the show and be able to like have like a good baseline of what's going on. I would definitely move. I have him at 22. I could see me putting him in the late teens for sure. Move Robbins, move Steele, move Henderson. Like, I like Travion, but like, I think ultimately there's just some sketchiness there. But my problem with Gore really is, I mean, how much do you guys care about 40% of your fantasy points coming in 3 games? And one of them was a bowl game. So his ranking at the end of the year could not have been that great. He had 50 points in the bowl game. So, like, where was he?
He was the RB 34 in CFF 2022.
So, I mean, he had 50 points in a bowl game against Rice. Like, come on. Like, he didn't blow up Alabama or something, right? So that is a lot of a concern for me. I mean, he had weeks that were plenty of touches, and he did nothing. 8 points, 7 points, 12 points, 15 points, which, like, if I'm drafting a guy top 20 at a position, like, 15 points is fine, but like, man, that was like, I get it what you're saying. And there's definitely guys that would move down in the last couple of weeks of changes. But, I think Marshawn Lloyd presents a much cooler, more fun, better option than.
And that's great, but you can get him. You can get him much later.
I do get him much later.
So
Gore, what is Gore's ADP right now? Like
early
third round,
real quick.
It's a steep cost.
I would say third round, I believe, is where he's been going.
I love Lloyd, but I don't take him in the 3rd round. I take him in like the 6th to the 9th round, and I think there's a huge difference.
Frank Gore is currently going towards the tail end of the 3rd round.
And, Nicholas Singleton is an interesting situation. You're dead on, right? Like, he's got the best. He's way better long term. But, like, if you look at his season, he was pretty straightforward, pretty consistent. Like, you got 40% of your production in three games. That's just tough for me to, like, think that that's going to be a real thing for the next year. And I still have him ranked pretty well. It's not like I discounted him. Yeah, I don't hate him. It's just relatively. Where did Nate have him, out of curiosity? Do you?
Sorry, I got so many things pulled up. I don't want to mess anything up.
You got a lot of tabs. No worries. So, I mean, I totally understand it. I would upgrade him a few spots for sure. But I gotta hate somebody, right?
Yeah. Let me see if I can pull it up here. Actually, never mind. It's not that important. Let's go ahead and move on to Justice. Justice, let's get you on trial here for your running back ranking. Let's talk about your ranking of Roman Hemby here, Justice. You got him at RB 50. I got him at RB 22. Chris K, you got him at RB 37, and I believe, yes, he is our consensus RB 27. So Chris Moxley and Nate as well have him ranked closer where I have him, which is why I'm not on trial for this ranking, even though I'm technically further away from K than you are there, Justice. But you got him all the way down ranked there at RB 50, man. Let us know. What do you not like about Roman Hemby here, man?
So 2 things real quick. Nate has Frank Gore number 11.
Appreciate it.
The other thing, me and Kay kind of had this conversation throughout this week, and something that I noticed in preparing for the 3 running backs we're talking about today, like essentially they're all the same person. It's just who you like and who you don't like. That's probably the best way to describe the difference. But I think the arguments that we're making for and against can be said for all 3 of these guys. So the reason why I don't like Hemby, so Hemby was 199th in points per play for running backs in 2022. And that was with running backs that had a minimum of 100 snaps. He was 39th in points per game in 2022, minimum of 100 snaps. Now, here's what could be you could take as a positive. He had the 9th highest snap count among running backs in last season. Having said that, he didn't get 1,000 yards. To me, if you're getting those kind of snaps, you need to produce much more than he did. So to me, it tells me his points are all predicted about, predicated on him getting a certain level of volume. And his points are very inconsistent. And he didn't do, in my opinion, all that great to begin with. So last season, he had 48% of the Maryland rushing attempts. That was the highest in the last 4 years. The 3 previous years, the highest running back had 32% twice and 30% in the other year. The other thing about Hemby, he's the worst run blocking running back they have on the roster. Probably a bigger point to, again, that his success was predicated on volume. Maryland's offensive line is going to be bad, or at least it's unknown. They returned 1 starter from last year's offensive line. They returned a total of 1,264 snaps. 940 of those snaps come from the 1 starter that returns. That's 75% of the offensive line snaps. Also, I found this quote from the 24/7 beat writer talking about spring practice, and he's talking about Ramon Brown. He says, another former 4-star recruit, Ramon Brown, is also showing his promise. It's probably unlikely he'll surpass Roman Hemby for the starting role after the breakout season Hemby had, but he will get his share of carries. Hemby has top-end speed, but Ramon Brown has more wiggle and elusiveness. He is the real deal. And I think I don't have the number in front of me. I thought I looked it up, but if you looked at the missed tackle rate by Hemby, it's not there. He's pretty low down on the list, and that kind of tells you like he has breakaway speed, but he's not an elusive, kind of guy. Similar to what Kay said about Frank Gore, the same thing can be said about Hemby. He was boosted by 3 games. Week 3 versus SMU, where he scored 29 points. Week 8 versus Northwestern, he had 38 points. And Week 12 versus Rutgers, he had 25 points. That's 44% of his points for the whole season in 3 games. Further to that point, he averaged 76 rushing yards per game. However, a third of those yards came in 2 games alone. He had 179 yards and 151 yards. He was 32nd in total points. In full PPR, he was. If you look at the Maryland history of running backs, so he was the highest. In 2021, the highest Maryland running back finished 55th in fantasy points. 2019, it was 101st. 2018, 115th. And I did actually, here's that missed tackle stat. He ranked 100th out of running backs with a minimum of 100 rush attempts in 2022. He had 7 games where he finished with less than 10 fantasy points. So I personally don't see it to be ranking him that high. I just think he's too inconsistent, and when you're ranking him that high, you're saying he's an outlier for Maryland. I personally don't believe that, but to me, that's what you're saying with a ranking that high.
I think he is an outlier for Maryland, mostly because not much has changed in that running back room since last year. Roman Brown's definitely something to be a little concerned about. I'll give you that. But in terms of all the other guys, he separated himself from that running back room. There's a reason why they kept putting him out there. And yeah, he's not a great run blocker, but you know what he is versatile in? The receiving game, where he got 33 passes this past year. So they put him out there for that kind of versatility. He's probably going to earn more receptions, in my opinion, this year than he did last year. So whatever he might not get in the rushing department, which I assume he's going to do well again this year, he might make up for in receptions because Talia loses 3 of his top guys from last year, Jarrett, Copeland, and Demas. Now, Deshaun Jones comes back, so you got your top guy still there. You got Corey Dyches, of course. But
they got Prather, they got Wester.
Yeah, but those are transfers. We don't know how they're going. We don't know how they're going to quite.
I don't think they're going to be worse than the guys that left.
Yeah, I think
from a production standpoint,
I think the Maryland receiver group was cool on paper and was overrated. Generally speaking, I think the NFL draft kind of like confirmed that. But I don't think that's worth digging into.
I didn't see that. Did Jared
last I looked in the 7th round, he hadn't gone yet.
Holy crap! Again, similar though as well to what I did with K Justice. You got guys ranked ahead of him that you're talking about how like there's some risk here with Hemby here, but you got Harrison Whaley all the way up at RB23. That feels crazy to me.
I am 1,000% comfortable with that.
I am too, to be honest. Like
1,000%.
What have you guys heard?
I don't bet money, but I would bet that. Like that's how
Swen was really good there, and he's not great in a bad off-field type person. It seems like.
Yes, but have we heard anything that confirms that Whaley is that number 1 guy for them?
Yeah. How do you?
We've been burned so many times by just assuming we know who the RB1 will be. They had some guys they seemed to like at the end of the year last year. Just because they brought in a guy from the MAC doesn't mean that all of a sudden, just because we like him for CFF, doesn't mean that all of a sudden he's going to be the number 1 guy. This guy turned into a Harrison Whaley thing all of a sudden real quick.
That is complete. We need to finish this Whaley thing real quick. That is completely fair. I think you're correct, right? Like it's not like he transferred from Georgia or Tennessee or Oklahoma State or something, right? Like he transferred from a MAC school, so that's completely fair. But like, what makes you think they liked who they had? Because like to me, all it was like, this is who's on our team, so you can run the football now. I didn't ever grasp or take their snaps as, oh, I love DQ James or whatever that guy.
Right, one I think they rotated last year too, right? They didn't. To me, there wasn't like a clear number 2 back behind Swen.
Yeah,
I'll have to look up Wyoming stuff here in a second. Anyway, Cade, prosecute this man for his Hemby ranking.
So I'm like,
real quick, by the way, Justice, you did a great job with your defense. I was not familiar with your game. You did a good job, dude.
Yeah, that really was incredible. And I'm like the perfectly temperature porridge because I'm in the middle
between
here.
Us both, yeah.
Yeah, and I think like the reason why I have him higher than you, Justice, is because I feel like his passing game usage, he's just very safe and reliable. Like he gets used a ton in the passing game. Yeah, he doesn't pass block. That's fine. That's fair. But I think like passing game usage is high. He's obviously a good runner. We've seen him play. This why I don't have him as high as Jared is a little bit more because of Brown. You know, he's a big recruit, so I totally get that. Maybe he does nothing. You know, maybe Brown is nothing, but there's enough there for me to not want to have him up. And what was up with Littleton? Littleton's this literally giant
massive
man
human being
that had 6 touchdowns or 7 touchdowns the very first 5 games and then did nothing the rest of the way. So I'm very curious to see, is that like a trend? Like, is that something we should foresee and continue to see? Or is that like a blip? Because what I would be worried about, just generally speaking, is this 5'11", 250-pound man stealing touchdowns. The good news is that Tag is not a runner necessarily. He's definitely not going to be stealing touchdowns around the goal line. So like, you don't have to worry about that on top. But yeah, I'm definitely more in the middle. I think like he's going to get enough usage for sure. I like his passing usage. And like ultimately, he's proven himself to be the best of the group as far as we can tell.
The thing, I guess, like to me, it feels like last season was pretty close to his ceiling, right? And so for me, I have a hard time ranking him, in towards the top end of the 20s when, that's not what he wasn't there last year. And I don't know that I don't see that he's going to do enough more to get there.
So one thing I want to point out here, and I appreciate the assist here from Ben in the chat because he actually brought up a good point. I want to throw this out here. You talked about how Hemby had a ton of his production in just a few games. In redraft, that's actually a huge piece. Best ball, maybe not as much because you would rather have a guy maybe that goes off every single week if you're drafting him in that range. But in terms of redraft, knowing when and when not to play a guy is huge. Those games that he had last year, Buffalo over 100 yards, SMU over 100 yards, Indiana against bad teams. So when he goes against bad teams, to play him. He's not going to give you a bust outside of Charlotte in week 2, but that was week 2. They're still kind of figuring out their team at that point.
Well, I would just say, for me personally, like he's not someone I'm going to draft because I don't see the super high upside with him as I do like with a Whaley, for instance, right? And that's why I have Whaley where I do, because to me the upside is so much higher.
What is his ADP right now? Because you're talking redraft, which means
his ADP is 33rd.
RB33.
What is that? What round is that?
Running back 33. I don't know what round that is. I just know he's running back 33.
10-ish round, 12-ish round.
RB33 is.
My thought is, are you drafting a running back in the 8th round so you can play him 6 weeks? Like, because that's what you're going to get because he's going to play Wisconsin, Penn State, Michigan.
I already
Ohio
told
State,
you that in that range,
essentially every single season. So you're just not going to play him
again with my strategy. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
No, you're fine.
In that range, I am typically drafting guys. Or I've already loaded up on my running backs. Like I told you earlier, like starting in round 3, I start loading up on running backs. So if I'm getting to 8th round, Hemby's still there. That's typically my RB4, RB5 on my team already. So that is a guy that I'm willing to put into different weeks. So maybe it is strategy based, but I still see the value there.
I get it. I think it's hard to play the schedule game because he's pretty much in that regard going to be not a great matchup for like 4 weeks right off the bat. And like he played Purdue and had 12 touches. And yeah, he had 5 catches for 60 yards and a touchdown. Otherwise, he was like not good. He didn't get a lot of usage. He just got the touchdown and that made it, Michigan State's not a good defense. He didn't do good, so I just think it would be very tough to justify it based on like, well, he's going to be bad this week, so you don't have to play him. Like, I just feel like that's a tough way to go.
That's a better argument for best ball than
exactly. I think
redraft,
I think he's more of a best ball guy because his upside week over week could be there, but you can't start him every week, and you probably are drafting him, and not you, Jared, and not me myself for sure because of how I'm drafting running backs. That just feels a little bit aggressive to sit for 4 weeks in a redraft.
Fair enough. All right, we got to move on to this last running back and everything. We'll put me on the trial here, even though it's pretty much on the trial last time. Let's talk about my ranking of Bucky Irving here. I got him down at RB61. I'll go ahead and start off with this. I think I do probably have him a little low. I'll probably bump him up a little bit, but I'm certainly not putting him up in the Chris K and Justice range of RB23 and 21. That feels absolutely crazy to me. You're talking about a guy who finishes the RB 47 last year, and quite frankly, the only way he even gets that high again is if you continue to rely on a uber efficient performance from him. Talking about a guy who averaged 6.8 yards per carry last year. That was, I believe, 17th among running backs last year. So typically, you're not seeing that same level of efficiency from everybody year over year. And quite frankly, he doesn't have the volume to warrant a top 20 selection here. He hit over 20 touches in a game. How many times do you think, Kay, did he hit over 20 touches in a game last year?
2 or 3. It wasn't a lot.
It was 2. It was 2 times he hit over 20 touches in a singular game, not even including his last game against UNC, where again, you're going up against the UNC defense. Definitely took advantage of that. So good on him for that. So in addition to him just not having the volume, you got 2 other running backs there that this staff seems pretty eager to use. You got Noah Whittington, who only had 26 less touches than Irving did last year. And quite frankly, you might be saying like, oh no, Irving separated himself towards the end of the year. Well, according to practice reports, Whittington is getting a ton of reps with the ones as well. So it doesn't seem like it has been that split from the 2 of them as well. And then similar to, again, this going back to, I think Justice nailed it on the point where there's a lot of similarities between all these arguments. You have a freshman from last year, Jordan James, who only got 47 touches last year. Ain't no way a guy of that caliber, 4-star freshman running back who is able to see the field that early, ain't no way he's only getting 47 touches again this year. They are going to give him more opportunities, and that's going to take away from a guy like Irving. I don't see how Irving really outperforms the volume he had last year, and quite frankly, I think he's going to regress in terms of touchdowns. I think I have him a little low at RB 61, but I don't see how he gets above RB 47.
Justice, I saw that face, so I'll let you go here. I have 2 quick points, quick counterpoints, real quick, and then Justice, I'll let you attack. Yeah. How many games did Roman Hemby have of 20 plus touches? You think?
Not many.
He had 4. Okay.
4.
How many?
That's
how
2
many
more
touches did Ramon Brown, the former 4-star running back, have last year? 43. So like your 2 positives for Roman Hemby. Or I'm sorry, your 2 negatives
for Irving are the same
Irving
negatives
or
for Hemby.
Same.
They're the same guy. That's what I was going to say.
They're really
one
close.
of them separated completely from the rest of his running backs last year. I will point that out. You're talking about Roman Hemby.
The other one
had over 200 touches, and the next guy had a little over.
You had your turn.
Sorry.
But Oregon's offense is going to score 20 more points a game than Maryland as well, right? So like there's that added benefit. Irving doesn't have to be that great. And his touchdown, he had 8 touchdowns and 180.
Yeah, I don't think I don't see him regressing. I think especially the rushing. He only had 5 rushing touchdowns. So I think that's going to go up.
I don't know.
Nick's is going to come down a little bit, I think, and Irving's going to go up.
Yeah, and I know that I know we've talked about like the freeze of the rankings, and you want to move him up. You said that at the beginning, but if you're worried about touches, I can get that, right? Like there's definitely not the amount of touches that you'd like out of like a top 30 running back. And I think looking at this, right, like, I'm glad that I have Gore ahead of him. Let's just say that by 1.
Yeah, I was saying, I almost brought that up earlier when you had him 1 behind Gore.
Thank goodness, right? I did that on purpose, totally. But I think he's really, really good. And he didn't do anything the first 2 weeks of the season or the last 2 weeks of the regular season when Bo Nix was like basically super hurt and their offense was really, really in shambles, right? So like, yeah, he did nothing against Georgia, and then they blew out Eastern Washington, so he got 8 touches. But at the end of the season, then too, right, he played at Utah and Oregon State, and he got limited-ish touches and wasn't super effective scoring. But Bo Nix had that ankle issue, and they didn't really gel as an offense. So, like, I think those are 4 weeks that are pretty easy to like validate as in like, well, like there's no way it's going to get worse.
Okay, fine. He does a little bit better. How does he get up to RB 20 range?
2 points a game better, probably, at least per my analytics.
So to me, the points of what's different from him and Hemby. Number one, the biggest difference between Bucky Irving and Hemby is the missed tackles. Bucky Irving was the 2nd highest missed tackle percentage in all of college football last season. So he doesn't need that volume to produce. He's able to, cause missed tackles and make the most of the volume he does get. The other thing I feel like from a game to game basis, he was more consistent than Hemby, especially once he took that backfield over after week 2. he only had 2 games where he
You
scored less
say he took over the backfield. He only out-touched Whittington by 26 touches.
Well, he was the starting running back. So once he did that, he only had 2 games where he finished less than 10 points. Both of those games were 9.7. He has just as much potential as Hemby in the passing game. He finished higher last year than Hemby. If I'm and to Kay's point, Oregon is going to score way more points than Maryland is. So, me personally, I'd rather have Irving because I feel like his success is not predicated upon volume alone, which I feel like that's how Hemby is.
What is Bucky's ADP? It's got to be what
29.
I would say RB 29,
6th, 7th round. Like you're really telling me you would rather take Hemby in the 8th over Bucky in the 7th.
6th round is where Bucky's been going.
6th round.
End of the 6th round.
I just have a hard time going. Like the Maryland offense is going to get worse, right? Like to me, it feels like it would get worse. But regardless, Oregon's offense is going to stay the same, right? Like maybe even if it gets worse, it's still going to be what 35, 38 points a game or something like that. You want to invest in good offenses, right? Like that's why I like Marshawn Lloyd so much. That's why I'm always drafting Brendan Rice and Taj Washington. Like all these guys to me are guys that like I might get them wrong, but like if I keep diversifying between the 3 of those USC guys at their ADPs, like they're gonna score a ton of points. They got to come from somewhere, right?
I mean, I think.
Sorry, I will say we do need to move this along, and it's not because I'm getting my butt kicked in this debate. It's because
they're all the same guy.
Well, I want to point out
it's all personal preference.
You guys are definitely convincing me more to move Hemby down than you are for me to move Irving up. I will say that because again, you're right, Justice. The more and more it sounds like these are kind of the same guy. Again, there is differences. Everybody has differences, but it's definitely convinced me more to put Hemby down. I'm a little high on Hemby compared to where he probably should be. We'll see. I wish Nate was here.
It's probably like a meet in the middle a little bit. I think like I should probably be moving Bucky down a little bit. I like my Hemby. It sounds like maybe you, Jared, should squeeze him a little bit tighter together, and maybe to see for justice. But like
I can see
Nate agrees with you on Hemby. Nate has.
Yeah, I would say Nate's with me. I know Mox is with me as well. So I'm curious to see how they respond to this debate. I wish either one of them were here. That way I could have some help here. Because, like I said, I'm getting my butt kicked.
This is what makes the world go around is differing opinions. You know,
True.
Like nobody thought Bo Nix would be a top 30 quarterback, let alone a top 5 quarterback. Yet that's what happened last year. So, well, actually, one person did, but
yeah, I just had to throw that one in there. Okay. All righty, let's get back over to here. Let's go talk about some of these. Where did I put it? There we go. Let's talk about the wide receiver rankings. Let's go ahead and run through these real quick. Number 1, we pretty much consensus. Top 2, Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malachi Corley. Those are our top 2. I think we all kind of go back and forth on where we have 1 and 2. Okay, I think you might have Corley 1. I have MHJ number 1, but I think you're looking at. I don't blame anybody for taking one over the other, frankly, although I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is pretty much the consensus number 2 overall pick. Number 3, Torrey Horton. Number 4, Roma Dunze. Number 5, Zachary Franklin. Y'all might as well scratch that off the list here because he is not a top 12 receiver as far as I'm concerned, unless he goes back to UTSA. Number 6, you got Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State. Number 7, Jalen McMillan. Number 8, Jacob Cowing. Number 9, Sam Wiglis. Number 10, Joshua Cephas. Number 11, Squirrel White. And number 12, Devontae Walker, transfer wide receiver from Kent State to UNC. Boy, after Jacob Cowing, feels like there's a big drop off there, doesn't it, guys? Okay, 2 things. 1, do you agree with the drop off after Cowing? But 2,
I would say the drop offs after Cephas.
Well, I was about to ask you, what about Cephas? Where do we move him up now that Franklin is gone from UTSA for the time being?
Probably after McMillan, I'm thinking. Which actually puts him number 6, right? Because Franklin's comes out.
Yeah, Franklin comes out. That puts him at 7
between the 2. Is there like really in my limited research? Is there really one that jumps over the other? Because if so, then I would 100% say, yeah, that guy's like a 2nd, a 3rd rounder.
Well, I think the issue is the injury with Clark.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's
the difference.
for me, like in my head, I'm thinking, okay, they're both, let's say, 5th or 6th rounders. Like, let's mash them up towards the 3rd to 4th round. And like, if you get one of them in that range, that's awesome. I don't know if I'm willing to say like 2nd round for one of them because I think they have some weirdness to it, but that's an awesome offense. And if Franklin really does leave, like, that's a lot of concentrated targets towards those two guys, even if one's not the clear receiver one.
Honestly, it kind of creates a mad dash to find out who that number 3 is, whether you think it's another receiver or if you think it's my boy Cardenas, the tight end who kind of showed out there a little bit at the end. I think that's somebody to keep an eye on. But anyway, so Justice, you think the cutoffs after 10, so do you consider Sam Wiglusz in the top tier of wide receivers? I personally don't. Mostly because, again, part of it's the Curtis Rourke injury, but also, like, I don't think he's quite, I don't know. It just seems like the MAC being a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking at? Varied, kind of week to week than some other guys. What do you think?
I mean, yeah, I'm a little concerned about the Rourke injury, but I do feel like where he's ranked. I mean, I feel safe. If he was my wide receiver 1, I'd feel safe with that. I'd feel much more better about that than if I had Squirrel White or even Tez Walker as my wide receiver 1.
No, see, this is why to me, it is a must-have for me in a draft to grab one of these first 8 guys. I mean, again, outside of Zachary Franklin, like, I cannot walk away from the first 2 rounds without getting Marvin Harris, like any of these top 8 guys. And honestly, it's enough to where I've started considering, like, if I haven't gotten the 101 pick yet this year, but Caleb Williams has been the 101 in every single draft pretty much I have done so far this season. I might heavily consider like taking a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr. or Malachi Corley with that 101 pick, because I do not trust the wide receivers that'll come back to me by even the 2nd round. Like, I might get lucky with a guy like Jacob Cowing. I wouldn't mind getting Jacob Cowing as my 2nd wide receiver there at the end, but I don't know that could happen. I would have to be heavily reliant on luck. I would feel screwed at wide receiver if I didn't get one of those top 8 guys.
To your point, Jared, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, I had the 101 in the league back when Malik Willis was the clear number 1 choice. And like, I did everything in my power to try to trade out of that because I didn't want to take Malik Willis.
No.
But I just felt like that the value, that's not where the value is. I wasn't able to trade, and I ended up taking Malik Willis just because I felt like I feel like I didn't have a choice. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. If I was facing a real draft today, I'm probably not taking Caleb Williams 101. If I can't trade it out, I'm probably not taking him. I'm probably taking, a Marvin Harrison Jr. or Corley.
I think there are 9 guys. I like to include Squirrel there. I just believing in the Squirrel. That's just where I'm at right now in my life.
You're high on all 3 of them, man. Like, cause you got McCoy and Thornton in your top 30 wide receivers. I think. Kay.
I think there's enough upside for me to like warrant taking the risk, and like, if I just draft enough, I'm gonna have a good percentage of the right one. But I think like 2 of them are gonna be great, and all it takes is one injury, like we saw last year, and that 3rd one was great. But whatever, right? But I think this is the clear difference between receivers and running backs. Like, the top 9 are awesome, or the top 8, let's say, even if you want to take away Squirrel.
Yeah.
Like, clear, amazing, great options at receiver. Like, no doubters. And then it's like, okay, I can pick holes in all these guys past that. Yeah. Whereas you take a look at the running backs, it's like, yeah, like, I can see why this guy might not be a top 15 guy, but like, there's a strong shot at it, right? Like, there's running back just tends to be a position that you can predict better because it's just, you can find the team that's going to give a guy 20 carries and their backups are not good or whatever, right? Like, where the philosophy is to give that main guy a ton of carries. So I think it's just a clear difference. For me, I've been taking receiver over, Corley or Harrison over Judkins at the beginning of the 1st.
Yep.
Because I think like those guys are just such studs. And I think you're right. Like, I think Corley and Harrison are 1 and 2. It just a matter, that's a personal preference. What do you prefer?
Yeah.
Tom McCord or whoever wins that job at Ohio State should be just fine. You'd be an absolute idiot not to throw to Harrison no matter how bad you are. So like you're probably good there. And Austin Reed returns with Corley. Like it's unbeatable combination there too. And they're roommates, which we love narratives. I love roommates. I love brothers. I love roommates. I love neighborhood friends from elementary school. Give me all that for my fantasy players.
So, okay, talk about Score White and everything. Score White, I agree with you. I mean, I like him. There's a reason why I have him ranked pretty high as well. But here's my thing. He feels so much better when you draft him when you have a guy like Rome Odunze or Torrey Horton from like the first or second round. And then you grab Score White as your second or third wide receiver off the board. It doesn't feel so bad if it feels like he busts then later, because then you're like, okay, if he busts, then I got two guys in front of me that felt like more surefire things that should be good to go. And then here's my other point. I mentioned earlier on this stream that, man, the running back position, I don't like who I can get super late. Let me tell you about some guys you can get in like the 10 plus round range already that I'm just seeing off the top of my head that I would love to take shots on compared to some of the guys that are even going in like the 5-6 range. Ryan O'Keefe, Boston College. Justin Lockhart at San Jose State. Love him over at San Jose State. LaJohntay Wester, Florida Atlantic. Isaiah Williams, we'll talk about him in a second. Sam Pinckney, Coastal Carolina. Terrell Vaughn at Utah State. Love all of these guys. And then you go even deeper than that. Like fun guys to take shots on. You got guys like Corey Rucker at Arkansas State. Shoot, Ramel Keaton at Tennessee. We're talking about Tennessee wide receivers. Take a shot on him. You got... let's see who other. I could have sworn I like some of these later guys a lot better.
It's crazy how deep it is. Like on Burning the Red Shirt, we talked about a couple of receivers that weren't even being drafted in best balls, like Kobe Hudson and Javon Baker. Like they had good seasons. Like the USC receivers I mentioned earlier, right? I think there are these four guys, Rice and Washington and those UCF guys are definitely best ball focused, but like we play a ton of best ball now, which is just a lot of fun for me and all of us. And good way to do the off season, but like why would you not consider those guys for a bunch of the later picks? So I'm definitely on the whole later receiver train for sure. Yeah,
like compare that to guys who are going around like the 5th round range. You got guys like Jamari Thrash, who we expect to be good at Louisville, but there's a lot of risk there. You got guys like Alex Adams at Akron. We're drafting Akron wide receiver as our wide receiver 25 in best balls right now. Again, they're going to be forced to pass the ball the whole time, but how much is Akron going to actually score there? You got guys like Evan Stewart at Texas A&M, Elijah Badger at Arizona State, all guys we expect to be good, but I feel like the other guys who are coming in behind them have much bigger upside. Does that make sense?
Yep.
All right, a couple questions here in the chat before we put me back on trial for my atrocious rankings. A lot of questions about Zachary Franklin here. Baylor Bear or Ben wants to know, where in the world does Zachary Franklin go in the transfer portal, and who would convince him to leave a good thing he has going on there at UTSA? And I'm going to follow the chat here. It's Dion. Like, it's got to be Dion coming in there, kind of messing things around there, you would think. I actually like the suggestion that Clint makes in the chat about going to Oklahoma. That could be a ton of fun right there, but I just feel like what are you holding up there, Justice?
I'm trying.
Oh, money.
That's what convinced him to leave right there.
That is indeed what convinced him to leave. But do you guys have a dream place where he could land?
I don't. There's no dream place better than UTSA. If we're being real, like
from a fantasy standpoint now.
From a fantasy standpoint, like if you're trying to get inside the mind of him, he's thinking money. That's the only reason why he leaves. It's kind of like Tyron Smith for UTEP, right? Like he went to go bigger. There's absolutely no way he transfers to another G5. He has to be going bigger. So what makes sense would be like Colorado. Like I think people have talked about Oregon,
Miami, maybe
offensive coordinator situation. This guy's recruiting. I'm looking at his like recruiting offers when he was out of high school, or like this is about as like low level as it gets. Like in terms of like offers. So like you can't even play into like what are those options going to be? So we have no idea. If it's not Colorado or Oregon, like it's anybody's guess.
I think Miami might be one.
Miami would definitely be one to watch.
Where is he from? He's from Texas.
That narrows it down.
Yeah, like okay, so A&M and Texas would be awful for us.
Maybe TCU. I don't know.
TCU would be cool,
God,
but they
I
have
would not like a TCU.
Yeah.
You got JoJo, you got John Paul Richardson there. Like I don't.
There's not a lot of good. I have a lot of Franklin because in these Champion Series best balls, I've just had every pick between 5 and 9 so far. It feels like so. Like I've gotten that receiver 3, and I'm like really honed in on getting receiver early. So like I have a bunch of Franklin already. There's just not really even the only place that would make him be. There's not really a place that would make him stay with that receiver one, like first round receiver type.
I don't think there is.
Not in the Power 5, I don't think.
Oregon, you have Troy Franklin, Tez Johnson in a super efficient offense. There's not a lot of volume there. Colorado, like as much as like, they're going to be playing from behind, which is good, but they also have a bunch of receivers.
And right? they're just not going to be a good team. So
yeah. And quite frankly, I think Dion plays favorites. Like, again, Travis Hunter is one of his prodigal sons right now. He's one of the faces of the franchise. Shedeur Sanders, his own son. Those are going to be the guys that get touchdowns. Franklin goes there. He'll probably promise the world, but his stat line by the end of the year is not going to represent it because he's not one of Dion's guys.
To be fair, too, like those guys that are remaining are pretty good at receiver, right? Like I feel like Travis Hunter is a good receiver, right? And they have a second guy too, right?
They got Weaver and Horn.
Weaver and Horn are like good receivers. They're not like
Trey Orr
scrubs, right? So there's just for me, I'm not necessarily worried about like favoritism, but that's a good point for sure. I'm just more worried about just who else is in the room, and I don't know what their offense is going to be. I know exactly what UTSA is. There's 3 dudes that are studs, and they're going to throw them nonstop. But that's totally fine because they're only going to throw to those 3 guys. I have no idea what they're going to do at Colorado. None.
Alrighty, we'll move on to the next question here. This one will go to Dan Blackburn because, Ben, appreciate you asking a lot of questions. We'll get back to your other one here in a second, but we're going to prioritize some other people in the chat here. Dan Blackburn said one simple thing, and that is simply, he said SMU. So SMU wide receivers. How are you guys feeling about this? Jordan Curley, I would say, is the one that's being drafted the highest out of the bunch. I think he is your best bet. But got a lot of talk about a one Mr. Jordan Hudson likely making his way over to the Mustangs. Let's assume that happens. Let's say Jordan Hudson lands at SMU. How are you guys handling the SMU wide receiver room from there?
I would guess. I mean, that still slots him behind Curley. I think. I don't know that I would bump him above Curley. I mean,
I haven't.
There's a lot of mouths there. You got Moochie Dixon. You got Jake Bailey. All accounts that Jake Bailey looked phenomenal last year. He just couldn't stay healthy. There was another transfer they had too, right, from Texas last season.
No, he's gone. He dropped out of the program.
Yeah, I mean, I think Hudson would be the number 2 guy for sure. I just don't know that he would be above Curley.
Curley definitely has the experience with the team. I made my stake last week with when Kevin was on the show where I said I think that Hudson would be the wide receiver 1. Probably should caveat that a little bit. I think he's a wide receiver 1 in talent. So therefore, I think it's very possible that he could overtake Curley if he were to outperform him down the stretch on the season. But I think at least to start the season, yeah, Curley's probably your number 1 guy. I just have no clue if by the end of the season who has the better stats, because I don't know when or if Hudson overtakes Curley as the number 1 option. Because I think he's much more talented than Curley. Yeah. It's just, how fast does he learn the system, and how fast can that coaching staff and the quarterback in Preston Stone trust him?
Yeah, and a lot of times too, in these more gimmicky or more college offensive styled offenses, it's not about talent. It's more like just knowing what you're supposed to do and being talented enough and knowing where to be. So talent obviously is awesome, but I've always said you don't have to be good in CFF. And I think that's probably where Curley is, whereas maybe Hudson's on the other end, where Hudson's the better receiver long term. But because he's new, because he maybe doesn't have the chemistry, because he doesn't have the playbook, that type of stuff might hinder him. I'm not going to have Hudson will be a dart throw. I feel like middle to end, so I might end up with some. But Curley is just a guy I haven't run into a whole lot myself.
Alrighty. And then Ben asked a little earlier about the Kentucky wide receiver room. This is another one of those, in my opinion, where it's talent versus system. The system with Liam Cohen benefits the slot, which is where Tavian Robinson's going to be playing at. But man, oh man, do a lot of us love the talent of Barry and Brown. Where do you guys find yourself in? Do you guys find yourself taking on either one of those guys?
I mean, I don't have the ADP in front of me, but I'm thinking you're getting Robinson at a pretty big discount compared to Brown, and so I'm taking Robinson.
I would agree. I mean, he's a former VT guy, so like I've seen him play. I was on him last year, and that was just weird, bad luck, bad offense ultimately, and bad quarterback play. I again probably won't have much of either of them. I think all three of those starters are really pretty good receivers.
Yep.
And I'm not necessarily sold. That's Devin Leary, right? Like I'm not necessarily sold on him. You know,
I think he can support one guy for sure, right?
Yeah. One of those guys I think is going to be incredible. So, again, you talked about ADP there, Justice. These two started relatively similar at the start of the season, but right now, Barry and Brown, wide receiver 42 in ADP, right in the middle of the 10th round there. Actually, no, 9th round, or 11th round, excuse me. And then you have Tavion going a little bit later at wide receiver 64, and you're looking at him in the 14th round.
Yeah, I'd take the discount.
I would take the discount as well, especially, again, I'm a systems guy. I like playing for the system as well. And again, Cullum seemed very excited about utilizing Tavion Robinson, so I have to take his word at that as well. All right, any other questions in the chat here? Just making sure I didn't miss anything before we get moving on to putting ourselves back on trial, where I'm going to make a fool out of myself once again. Boys, I think we're ready for it. Let's get this over with. Let's put me back on trial. We'll start with me, then we'll go to Kay, and then we'll go to Justice. Let's go ahead and put my guy up here. I got to defend my ranking of Isaiah Williams, whom I have at wide receiver 27. This is a guy that guys, it's hard for me to let go of Isaiah Williams. He has one of my favorite things, and that is volume. The problem is he just has to get out of this, the way they've been utilizing him the last couple of years, which they say they plan on utilizing him in a different role this year. They're going to target him downfield a little bit more, and that is a little bit what this ranking is predicated on, because without that, this whole thing falls apart very, very quickly. Last year, abysmal 8.7 yards per reception, and abysmal ADOT of 3.3 yards. For those of you who don't know what ADOT is, that's average depth of target. So that means that Isaiah Williams on average is 3 yards past the line of scrimmage when he is targeted. That is heavily impacted by the fact that 43% of his targets came from behind the line of scrimmage. So tons of screen passes to him. And it really even though he gets the volume, he's great for PPR. It is very much detrimental to him because it doesn't give him really a lot of room to work with. A lot of times those screen passes only go for 3-4 yards per pass, versus if he's targeted downfield, suddenly you're looking at a little bit more of 10 to 12 yards per pass. The things that'll benefit him this year, this defense is going to take a step back this year. They are 94th in returning production. They lose their defensive coordinator. They are not going to be able to play as conservative with their offense as they have in the past couple of years. And I think that does play into their talk about utilizing him downfield a little bit more. In addition, they lose their deep threat from last year, Brian Hightower. He heads off to Cal. That opens up a little bit more opportunity for Isaiah Williams to be hit downfield. It also helps that they, I think, get an upgrade in QB this year in Luke Altmaier, who I think is a much better quarterback than what they've had in Tommy DeVito or Brandon Peters the last couple of years. Again, marginal benefit, but thank you, sweetheart. A marginal benefit, but I think there's enough to warrant that he's going to improve compared to where he was last year. And if he keeps that volume and he continues to be that number one guy, I think that we're in for a pretty good surprise here. I can fully admit I think my ranking's a little aggressive.
So I did not foresee Tommy DeVito Luke Altmaier being better than Tommy DeVito.
Dude, DeVito's awful. He's really not good.
He's bad, but did you see his stats last year? 62% complete. 70% completion.
Yeah, because they were all throws to Isaiah Williams behind the line of scrimmage.
Well,
He
it's
wasn't
not
asked to do anything.
Well, have you seen Altmaier before? I don't know what Altmaier is supposed to be. Like I thought maybe he's a runner, but his stats don't show it. He's not a passer. I've seen his stats like in a very pro passing offense. No, albeit limited numbers and stuff. My concern is that offense is just not very good. Like he's going to get volume and targets 100%, 25 to 30% of target share for sure. But are they going to score? Like, are they going to like throw to him down the field? Like, that's that coach speak that I worry about with like, oh yeah, we want to use him more down the field. Like, that sounds great in theory, but like your quarterback's Luke Altmaier. Like I'm not necessarily in love with that. I like Isaiah Williams to an extent. I think his ADP is worse than receiver 27.
Oh, easily.
His ADP is wide receiver 51.
Yeah.
I like for that. I do like him, right? Take a more upside focused receiver at the top. Maybe you take Squirrel. Maybe you take somebody like that at the top. Isaiah Williams is like a perfect complement because he will have a pretty decent floor. But, I just have a hard time when he's not going to get 12 to 15 yards a catch and he's not going to score 10 touchdowns. That's my only concern. The volume is 100% there. It's just the other stuff that prevents me from loving him in the top 40 as I've seen.
Mm-hmm. Justice.
So like, this is kind of like the Roman Hemby. K's in the middle, and me and Jared on opposite ends of the spectrum. So he's a very inconsistent wide receiver on a team that likes to run the ball. I'm going to give you his fantasy point stat lines from last season. 6.1 points.
Yes, I know.
21.7 points.
I looked at it too.
3.5 points.
I looked at it too.
20.8. He has a negative game. He had negative 0.9 points.
Not in PPR he didn't, I can tell you that much.
This was in half PPR league.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
So it wasn't full PPR, it was half.
Yeah,
But,
it's probably one catch for negative 14 yards or something.
Actually, I think it was like 3 catches for negative yards or something. But anyway,
that's what happens when you only throw to him behind the line of scrimmage. Again, like it is. This
the ADOT's ridiculous. The ADOT's ridiculous. Like, come on, guys. Like, you can throw it further than.
So my problem with him is his path to fantasy relevance is based on one of two things happening for him in a game: super high volume or multiple touchdowns. And this is an offensive system that wants to run the ball. It's not a high scoring offense. And so for me personally, that's not something that I'm willing to invest a high price in for fantasy purposes. If it was best ball, absolutely, I don't have a problem drafting him. But in a redraft league, he's not someone that I'm going to draft. He finished 110th in points per game last year and 89th in total points. So I don't know. I almost feel like I was too generous ranking him 54th, but
apparently not.
I tried to do the whole Jared thing, and you did a good job with your rankings. Like, I can look at your receivers and say, okay, well, like I kind of see it, or we kind of have decided not to change anything recently. The one guy that jumps out to me that is very interesting is Dorian Singer.
Yes,
you have him at 37 to.
I might have
10
him
spots
lower
behind.
I don't think he's starting wide receiver. At least from what I can tell in the reports of spring camp.
You think that Dorian Singer, who was great at Arizona, is transferring to USC to not start when they don't have really a true number one? Like Mario is whatever, and Taj is a different position and smaller. And the best comparison would be like Brandon Rice. You think that he's not going to be the 15
I have not
to 22%?
I have not seen enough to think that he's the number one guy. If you notice, I don't have any USC wide receiver ranked that high. I don't know how to look at that room yet. If I start to see a guy separate a little bit more, then I will definitely have them ahead of a guy like Isaiah Williams. I just don't think, again, I got burned a lot last year. Assuming
that's bad luck on Addison, though.
No. I'm not talking about Addison. I'm talking about I'm talking about transfer receivers in general. Gotcha. I did too much of assuming guys that were coming in would immediately become those starters. And then week 1, week 2, I drafted them high, and all of a sudden I'm panicking with a few guys because all of a sudden they're not even starting. yeah, maybe they have some good weeks here and there. I'm taking a lot more cautious approach this year with transfers than I have in the past. Versus a guy like Isaiah Williams, he's been there with Illinois a couple of years. Chase Brown became Illinois' cheat code last year because like he was clearly the best player on the team. I think Isaiah Williams could be that for Illinois this year, especially if they don't have a standout at running back again. Again, clearly not to the same degree as Chase Brown, obviously, but even still, I will take a shot on a guy like Isaiah Williams, who I really think can be a touch hog, even for an offense that is clearly not as good as USC's. Does that make sense?
I don't know the answer to this question, and you guys probably don't either. What's his best wide receiver season as a coach? I don't know.
Bielema, I mean, he's all Wisconsin and Illinois. I can't imagine he's very good, right?
Right. Well, that's kind of
Wisconsin,
what
Arkansas,
expect,
and Illinois.
Oh yeah, I'm sure the Arkansas years are just as bad.
It just that's part of my issue with him is that he wants to run the ball so much and control the ball. I just don't see him. I don't know.
I think I
definitely don't see him as high as 27.
No, and I probably need to bring him down just a little bit. And again, maybe like I'm putting this in like, oh yeah, best ball, PPR, which are a lot of best balls that I've done are that way. So like I'm like, yeah, 27, like yeah, I'll take a shot there. But no, I agree. I probably got him a little too aggressive. I think you still have him too low, Justice. I think you need to believe in him a little bit more. But
he has a negative game, man. That's rough.
That's pretty rough. Again, I despise how this coaching staff uses him, and that's my one big drawback is that they didn't change offensive coordinators. If they did change offensive coordinators, I would have probably been a lot more aggressive about this. All right, Chris, let's put you on trial here. Let's get you for your ranking of Oronde Gadsden Jr. the second. Everywhere I see has him the second rather than just junior. So. Okay, wide receiver 23. Justice and I have him down at wide receiver 33 and 34. Clearly not nearly as a big of a gap as we've seen with some of the other guys here. So probably less yelling and screaming on this one, to be sure. And so the funny thing is I'm looking at ADP. ADP has Oronde Gadsden right in the middle of us. So ADP has him as wide receiver 28. So, Kay, why are you so high on Oronde Gadsden this year? Again, tight end wise, we all agree if he's a tight end, like he's a smash play.
He's probably tight end too, right?
Probably tight end 2, tight end 3.
I think he might be tight end 1.
It wouldn't be crazy to call him tight end 1.
Yeah, that's another. But I think so I do think there's upside in him being switched to tight end. And Jared, you did this the other day with Fantrax, messaging them. I wanted to take him a couple times in the Champion Series draft and then complain to Fantrax. So please stop sending messages and wait like a couple weeks so I can get some more shares.
I'm fighting it, dude.
But I mean, he is a tight end. He is a tight end, 100%, right? Like for 2 years straight, says on the website, like, but whatever. Let's get past that. I think the value in him is like he had like 6 or 7, 8 games of essentially 15 fantasy points or more. So I think like there's a good floor there. Strader's not good at quarterback, but like Gadsden came on super strong in the final 45 to 60% of games, right? That final half of games, I thought they started to target him more. I mean, he's obviously super talented. He's a big guy. They don't have anybody else to throw to. So like, even if they are more run heavy, like they can still throw to one guy and it's going to be him. Sean Tucker was amazing. Like, how many games does Sean Tucker have like 10 catches or like 10 targets? I think that LeQuint Allen showed in the bowl game that he could do similar, but that's a lot to ask for a young guy. And I do like LeQuint Allen for sure. Mm-hmm. I just think that the upside is there for the tight end eligibility that I think like I will take him early as a receiver, knowing that my floor is pretty good. He's going to get good target share. He is an actually talented player that's getting a lot of usage. And if he becomes a tight end, he literally breaks the slate. Like he is a player that if he is a tight end, he breaks the season. You know what I'm saying? And so I will take that risk and draft him 2 to 3 rounds higher than he should be, knowing I have a high floor or a decent enough floor and just season breaking potential as a tight end.
So
So
a lot of your argument, it sounds like, is based on you assume that your
it's
commissioner is
it's
going
floor
to.
plus potentially tight end.
I would say
Yeah.
that is assuming that the commissioner is going to let you change his eligibility after you've drafted him as a wide receiver.
It's all
Which-
depends on your settings
I
too,
would
right?
say-
You got to know
yeah.
your settings. Like in what I'm drafting in best ball, like it's basically whatever Fantrax says goes,
Mhm.
right? So like
Yeah.
if he becomes a tight end, he's then eligible for tight end.
So
Almost every league I'm in is the same way.
I would say, let me argue this as just a wide receiver because that's how I base my argument around this.
Sure.
He finished as the wide receiver 52 last year. I really don't see the path for him to finish above that as a wide receiver, let alone being in the top 24. And again, like I see again, I clearly like him because I'm still wide receiver 33, and I think it's partially because of all the guys that have left that I have to move him up a little bit. But I definitely think it's a little hard to see a path to really much more than that. Garrett Schrader's back, which unfortunately means that the passing game is probably still capped as much as it can be, even if you are running a Robert Anae, Jason Beck offense here. Yes, Ben, I know he's a tight end. I'm talking about him as a wide receiver because he's a wide receiver on Fantrax. Good Lord, man. So, in addition to that, you have Garrett Schrader coming back. I think there's still some unknowns with Jason Beck now at the helm at offensive coordinator. Yes, we fully expect him to run the Robert Anae system, but we've seen guys before where we think they're going to run a similar system and then they completely change things up a little bit because they just have, again, maybe they have a similar philosophy, but they're like, no, we're going to utilize our talent just a little bit more. We'll see. Again, I think there's still a little bit of risk, too much risk to put him in the top 24 there. And then, again, I'm going to bring this back up. You got him ranked ahead of some guys that I think are kind of interesting, Kay. Tyron Smith. You told me you ranked him as if he is back at UTEP. How do you justify Rondé Gadsden above Tyron Smith if you know Tyron Smith's going back to UTEP where he was an absolute monster last year? Luther Burden, with the offensive coordinator change that he's getting over there, you got him ahead of him. Tetariah McMillan, you have him ahead of. I don't know. I feel like I would take all three of those guys before I took a shot on a Rondé Gadsden there.
Yeah, I mean, McMillan, I can understand. I think he's a big play, big catch guy, so like there's some volatility there, but I get it. I will never be on Luther Burden. Sorry, like he was force fed stuff. He's got bad quarterback play, and it is what it is. You know, like he just didn't produce to what we thought he would. I mean, I get it. I'm not even banking on him having like this cool and a back offense. Like I don't need like a fun offense for Gadsden to be good. You know, like he had bad quarterback play. He had other receivers that were more veteran, and he still was at what 27% of the target share. Like that's about as good as it's going to get. Which is funny because I'm looking at RotoWire and I had to go to tight ends to see his stats, which is just hilarious. But you know, like as a receiver, like what is it? What 22% his floor? Like he's huge. He's a red zone threat. He's a touchdown threat. Like I get it. I'm willing to take the risk because I know that if he is just a straight receiver, I still look at him as top 35, you know, like, so I'm basically saying, you know what, I'm taking a top 35 receiver at 23.
Could do a lot worse.
But he could be a tight end too. Like, so you will be seeing me on Twitter just spamming Fantrax in about 3 weeks. After 2 more drafts, it's just going to be nonstop. Nonstop.
Real quick, Dan Blackburn, I saw your question. You're asking about his size. He is 6'5", 216 pounds, which is probably where the wide receiver stuff comes from.
But
he's
probably the only reason why he's still a receiver.
I would say, but he's listed as a tight end on Fantrax, or not on Fantrax, on the Syracuse
roster.
Yeah.
So,
but here's the negative. Apparently, he was listed as a tight end last year.
And they still never changed it.
On Syracuse and on their website, and they never changed. We have to spam them with the team pages, everybody. We need to do the coach articles where I'm telling you right now, tight end. We have to join together as a team.
What they're going to do is they're going to tell you, hey, go talk to our support team in the 3-bar menu. That's the response they give me every time I bring up something like this.
Yeah.
Also, Kay.
But you still send them an email with that same information.
Yeah, true. Okay. One thing your ranking will be justified, in my opinion, if Lamson takes over at QB. It's just a much better passing quarterback for Syracuse, and I would buy into that upside a little bit more.
Lamson's interesting quarterback. I know what Schrader is, and I know what Gadsden can do with Schrader. So part of me is like, that upside could be cool, but like Lamson could be just a dumpster fire. So it's a give and take. It's a catch-22 maybe, and like what that goes. So it could be fun. A better quarterback would be awesome for him too. So that'd be nice.
Alrighty, let's go ahead and move. Justice, do you have anything to say?
I was gonna say I haven't said anything yet.
Oh, I mean, I'm so sorry.
This has been a heated topic.
I'm so sorry, Justice. What am I doing here, man?
So, me and Kay have been talking this week, and one of the things I told Kay after doing some research for the show today was I felt like I was probably a little too low on him, and I told Kay that he probably should be 28. Well, that's where I didn't have the ADP when I said that, but that's where the ADP has him. So
good job, public.
To me, the negatives for him is his like high output games are very dependent upon multiple touchdowns. The positive for him is he is very consistent with receptions and yards. It's like you can put it in the bank. He's going to get 6 to 7 catches for 85, 90 yards. Like it's going to happen.
Yep.
The other point I had is the thing that Jared just mentioned. I would feel so much better about him if he didn't have to rely on Schrader and Lamson was the quarterback. Like that would make, like I said, I would move him up closer to where Kay has him if that was the case.
I would too.
I mean, the other points I had, you've kind of already made, so I don't want to belabor those points.
So the Lamson piece is interesting. You guys are really like if you're
he's a better passer. He's
just a straight up better passer.
Is he just a better straight passer? Do you think like if you're Syracuse, would you seriously consider putting Lamson in over Schrader, or do you think Schrader's running ability kind of helps offset the lack of passing ability?
So I was one of the guys that was on Schrader probably earlier than anybody else when he went to Syracuse, and then he eventually took over the later that year. It's one of my prouder moments. So like I have a soft spot for Schrader. I am legitimately worried about Lamson taking over at some point this year, because Schrader looked bad at times last year. And I think the only reason he didn't get benched was because their best option behind him was Carlos Del Rio Wilson, who is not a great quarterback in his own right. Mm-hmm. If you get a guy like Lamson who's going into a Robert Anae or Jason Beck offense where they have to pass a ton and you have to rely on your arm a little bit more, yeah, it makes a ton of sense, in my opinion, if you're Syracuse, to go and rely on a guy like that.
Yeah, I could see, though, with no Tucker, the Schrader's legs being a positive this season.
We also don't know if Lamson really can run, because again, with the most we've seen Lamson in his spring games, and they're not going to let him run in a spring game.
But he was like really, really good in that one spring game, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And then he got hurt.
Yeah.
Am I thinking of the right guy?
Tore his ACL. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I wonder if he tore his ACL running. Sorry,
I hope not.
I shouldn't say that.
I'm pretty sure it's an ACL. I don't know that for a fact, but
it's either ACL or MCL. I couldn't remember which one off the top of my head, but he was out for the season regardless. So, alrighty, Justice, have you felt like you've been able to say your piece? I am so sorry we almost skipped over.
No, you're good.
I got caught up in the moment.
Justice is about to give us like 10 minutes of just straight fact on why his receiver is the best receiver ever. So
actually,
I'm defending a low ranking, and I did not, and I don't have a long a speech as I had for Hemby. So,
dude, your Hemby was incredible.
Dude, you did a great job on Hemby. That was probably the most convinced I've been on one of these summits. You did a good job there. Alrighty, let's go ahead and put you on the board. That's Kay's thing. Let's put Justice here. There we go, Justice. Let's get you to your ranking of Mr. Troy Franklin. Kay and I have him at wide receiver 15 and 17 respectively. Let me see what his consensus ranking is for us. He is our consensus wide receiver 16, so right between Kay and I. Justice, you got him down there at wide receiver 27, man. What did Franklin do to you, dude? Y'all, I am so sorry about that. I don't know what's going on with my internet here all of a sudden. We are good to go. I got the green light from my streaming software, so let's start back over. Justice, talk to us about your hatred of Troy Franklin here all the way down at wide receiver 27. good, sir.
Hatred's a strong word. I don't know that I would say hatred, but so we've talked about this Oregon offense multiple times today, and all three of us at some point have said how efficient that offense is. And that's my reason for my ranking of Troy Franklin is given how efficient he was, can he reproduce that same season again? Or even improve upon it when you're talking about drafting him in the top 15. So last season he was 25th in points per reception, and he was 19th in receiving touchdowns per reception. The other thing that we've talked about today that concerns me a little bit, and we I think one or two of us have talked about this, is Tez Johnson and the nepotism factor with him being, he's Bo Nix's stepbrother. So is that gonna is Tez Johnson gonna take away some of those yards and receptions from Franklin? The biggest concern with me with Troy Franklin is the inconsistency. If you looked at his points for every single game last season, and I'm not going to read through all of them, but it was extremely inconsistent. 4.4 points, 19.4, 9.9, 22.2, 5.3, 29.2, 4.9, 4.6, 22.4. You get the picture. It was very, very up and down. He had 4 games where he was below 5.3 points, and that was in a half PPR league. Traditionally, Oregon wide receivers have not been the best in terms of fantasy. I kind of give him a break on that point with the new offensive coordinator, right? I'm sure one of you guys are going to mention that, and that is a positive. There's no doubt, 100% that is a positive for him. Last season I had him ranked 33rd in terms of total points and 52nd in terms of points per game. But that inconsistency is the main reason why I have him ranked where I do. He's wide receiver 14 in ADP. I personally don't see myself ever having own him anywhere just because of that.
So there's areas where I agree with you and I disagree with you, Justice. I'm agreeing with you in the fact that, like, I'm not a big fan of the late teens wide receivers anyway. I told you, this is typically the range where I'm loading up on running backs. I'm avoiding the wide receivers because I think there's too many questions for a lot of these guys. So I get a lot of your concern here, Justice. You're right. I'm bringing up the OC change here. I think this is, I don't know if it's necessarily an upgrade in terms of just football in general, because Kenny Dillingham's a good offensive coordinator. There's a reason why they were so efficient last year. But in terms of CFF, you're bringing over Will Stein, who is just helping Jeff Traylor run that UTSA offense we love so much over there with the Roadrunners. And you worry about what Tez Johnson does. Well, you also have to consider the fact that 2 of the top receivers in Chase Cota and Dante Thornton have left, so that opens up a little bit of opportunity there. Tez Johnson probably fills a ton of that if you assume that he starts. He's currently running with the 2s, but again, you're right, nepotism probably wins out. He could take over that slot by the time the season starts around. But even still, we saw last year with UTSA, Decorian Clark and Joshua Cephas, along with Zachary Franklin, all were CFF relevant at one time. Clark probably was only as low as he was because he got hurt, but Cephas finishes as a wide receiver 31. Franklin, wide receiver 11 last year. So there's possibility for 2 wide receivers here for CFF relevancy, which is a change compared to what Dillingham's done. But Dillingham, we've always known, likes to get one wide receiver a lot of touches, but it never quite reaches that level of... They never quite reach that level of CFF superstardom. We've seen that with Will Stein as an offensive coordinator. If he truly is bringing that offense over to Oregon, I think this is a very fair shot to take here. Again,
sure,
there's multiple wide receivers that could be relevant here, and I think the safest one to take is Troy Franklin out of the bunch. He was separating himself, in my opinion, very much so last year compared to the rest of this wide receiver room. Tez Johnson, again, there is definitely something to consider there, but we also should be careful not to overcorrect from, I won't say our mistake, but what we learned with Charlie Jones last year. I think it is, again, nepotism is a very real thing, but I don't, again, I don't think we're overcorrecting because, again, it's not like Tez Johnson's going in like the same range as Troy Franklin or anything like that. But in terms of like truly thinking that he'll be the guy to keep Troy Franklin from reaching his height, I think that might be a little bit overblown. Because again, multiple guys can be good in this system.
The one thing I would say about the new OC is he's going from Conference USA, which is, in my opinion, by far the worst conference in FBS football.
You are not wrong.
To a Power 5 team. So we got to be careful too that we assume it's going to be a 1-to-1 translation, right?
Yes.
Can it be? Absolutely. But we've also seen it can't be, right?
No, I agree.
We saw, Western Kentucky bring in the Kitley offense, and it was humming, right? But then you saw the other end of the spectrum where Washington State brought in Eric Morris, and the results weren't so great. So
I think two
or
things
like
there.
Texas Tech too, right?
Yeah.
I think two things there. One, Pac-12, thankfully, out of the Power 5 conferences, has the worst defenses.
Sure.
So there's not as big of a jump.
But it's still going to be a step up. Right?
Oh, it's still going to be a step up, no doubt about it. But also, you know what else he has a step up in? Offensive talent. I would argue that Bo Nix is a better quarterback than Frank Harris, just on a talent level. I would argue Troy Franklin's probably better than Zachary Franklin, Joshua Cephas, or DeCorian Clark on a talent level.
This is a question probably for you, Jared, since you're familiar more with Georgia than us. But do you think that Dan Lanning is going to let him just sling it around all that much, being a defensive-minded coach? Do you think he might try to control that a little bit?
I think he learned a lot. What Kirby learned a lot in that last year is that when you have to recognize when it's not your wheelhouse. I think, again, he wants to be the head coach, but Dan Lanning was there that last year when Kirby finally gave the keys over to Todd Monken and saw how much that worked when Kirby finally just kind of let go of the controls and said, hey, I hired you to do a job. You do it. If I ever see anything truly that's costing us games, then I will come over and tell you to do something different. But as long as we keep winning games, I'm just going to keep letting you be you. I think he learned that, and I think so long as Will Stein is calling plays that are beneficial to the entire team in general, and they keep winning games, he's not gonna care.
Well, I think that's the key point you just said. It's got to be beneficial to the whole team because there's so many of these offenses that just sling it around so much, they leave the defense out to dry, right? Mm-hmm. And over the course of a game, it shows. Where the defense just can't get stops late in the third quarter and the fourth quarter. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see kind of how that dynamic plays out with Oregon, I think.
No, I think it's a very fair point. Okay, your thoughts here, man.
This is a best ball pick for me, and I like him in that format because I think, like, when the ups are ups, they're big. The efficiency is concerned. Like, can they maintain that? Like, as much as I love Bo Nix, like, was that 1 year? Or, like, was that just a good year? Is that, like, something we're going to see again? I can see some concerns there as well. Like the new offensive coordinator trends positive, right? Like, what was Oregon doing last year? They were throwing to everybody, right? They threw it's kind of like TCU in a sense, but not as much, like 15 to 18% targets for everybody, it seemed like. And that's probably wrong factually, but like close to it, right? So like I could see, somebody like Stein coming in and maybe we see a more concentrated offense, which would be incredible for Franklin, for Tez Johnson, for whoever, right? I don't know. I like him. I think best ball is a perfect best ball format. I don't have to worry about plugging them in and hoping that, they're efficient. Nate was asking us the other day about like efficiency of Oregon's offense. Like, remember too, right? Like, they did nothing the final weeks of the season because Bo Nix was hurt. So, like, Franklin's last year production it feels like a pretty good prediction for this upcoming season at the very least. Mm-hmm. I don't know. They're so hard to project, right? Like, when you get these efficiency numbers that are insane, the yards per attempt, the speed, all that type of stuff is really hard to project, but I'm willing to bet that it's more likely to happen than it's not. So I have him there. I don't disagree with Justice. I think efficiency is definitely a concern, but I'm willing to bet on it on a 5th-year quarterback with a ton of experience, and just hope that it continues the trend. I don't have a ton of Franklin, and I probably won't have a ton of Franklin. I have some for sure, but definitely best ball format for me.
And Jared, maybe I don't know who I have ranked like immediately in front of him. I could see myself moving him up a little, but I don't know that I would get much past like say 21, 20.
Let me keep stalling. I'll look it up. Just now I'm curious.
I'm very intrigued with the offensive coordinator. That's a big positive for him, right?
Mhm.
Because like you said, it's going to be based on what we've seen.
Could it be more concentrated?
Right? And
so I think if that were the case, I mean, it's obviously good for Franklin. I think it would be way better for Tez Johnson. Tez Johnson's a guy that I like.
Or
I
Chris
am
Hudson.
in my head thinking like, or Chris Hudson. I'm thinking in my head like, okay, I need to be weary of where he's going, and I need to think about like where my roster is, because that feels like a good buy, right? Like there's the family connection, there's the talent connection, the speed connection. He looked good today in the spring game. He had like a really nice long touchdown. If they do throw more to the 2 and 3 and less the 4, 5, 6 receivers, then like that's really good for him. So I think like the offensive coordinator thing is nice for Franklin, but it's even better for Johnson.
So
Justice, you got.
I have it up here.
Okay.
So I think he should be above Robinson. I think he should be above Thrash for sure. Farouk. I would say, just looking without going too far up my rankings, I probably could comfortably move him up to like 23.
And there's other guys I think you have ahead that like I
agree. I see 2 off the top of my head.
You could probably move down a little bit.
Move down a little bit. But I didn't scroll all the way up to my top. But yeah. So I think I could move him into my, let's say, top 20.
All right, that sounds good. I'll consider that a win. We'll bring him up about 7 spots. So, alrighty, y'all. Really appreciate it. Again, really sorry about the technical difficulties there in the middle of the stream. Hopefully, those of you who are, I'm gonna turn it off. Jesus Christ. Hopefully, those of you who had to leave whenever those issues were going on are able to catch the end of this, so you can see Justice's defense of Franklin. Really appreciate those of you who were able to catch us here. Whenever I can, I'm going to come through. I'll edit this stream and everything, kind of get out some of that stuff there in the middle. But again, you guys are awesome. Really appreciate all the questions in the chat. Unfortunately, we don't really have time to take any more wide receiver questions here because we're already over time. Chris, Justice, you guys have been absolutely awesome. Appreciate you guys coming on here for 2 hours on a Saturday night to talk some CFF as always. You guys did a great job arguing back and forth, talking about the wide receivers and running backs. Really put me in my place when it came to those running backs. So great job there, y'all. I need an ego check every once in a while. Again, you guys have all been awesome. Really appreciate you guys tuning in. Be sure to check out CTN on Monday. Really great show there with one John Lobb and Eric Froton playing some CFF. The Price is Right. So make sure you go check that out. Tons and tons of fun there. Until then, really appreciate all of you guys listening, and we'll see you guys next time. Have a wonderful and blessed weekend. Wait, okay? You got something? Oh, you're throwing up deuces. I thought I saw the one finger, and I was like, I thought you were holding up. Oh, also be sure to check out the CFF guide when that comes out on July 1st. Good Lord, I am off tonight. Appreciate y'all.